Farley Augustine will also present the highly anticipated statement on the audit reports of several state programs. Thursday, September 22nd, all roads lead to Shore Park Cultural Facility from 1:30 p.m. Or you can tune in on our social media channels to witness the action. Either way, don't miss it. The 2021 to 2025 session of your Tobago House of Assembly will reconvene for the 9th sitting this Thursday, September 22nd at 1:30 p.m. The sitting promises to be quite exciting as the minority will pose several questions. The Chief Secretary and Secretary for Finance, Trade and the Economy, Farley Augustine, will also present the highly anticipated statement on the audit reports of several state programs. Thursday, September 22nd, all roads lead to Shore Park Cultural Facility from 1:30 p.m. Or you can tune in on our social media channels to witness the action. Either way, don't miss it. 2025 session of your Tobago House of Assembly will reconvene for the 9th sitting this Thursday, September 22nd at 1:30 p.m. The sitting promises to be quite exciting as the minority will pose several questions. The Chief Secretary and Secretary for Finance, Trade and the Economy, Farley Augustine, will also present the highly anticipated statements on the audit reports of several state programs. Thursday, September 22nd, all roads lead to Shaw Park Cultural Facility.
Let us now pray. O Almighty God, as we have come together to begin our meeting of the Assembly, we humbly beseech you to grant to all our members the light and guidance of your Holy Spirit, that we may take wise counsel together and come to such decisions as shall promote your glory and the well-being of all citizens in this our land, so that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be enjoyed by all people. Grant this for the sake of Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen. You may be seated.
Oath of allegiance of a new member. Announcements by the presiding officer.
Members, requests for leave from today's sitting was submitted by Assemblyman Watson Duke. Members, the leave is granted.
Assembly bills sent back from Cabinet. Assembly laws brought back from Parliament. Petitions, papers.
Papers to be laid in the House, the Tobago House of Assembly monthly budget as at the end of April 2022, the Tobago House of Assembly monthly budget report as at the end of May 2022, the Tobago House of Assembly monthly budget report as at the end of June 2022, the Tobago House of Assembly monthly budget report as at the end of July 2022.
Presentation of reports from Dispute Resolution Commission, Select Committees. Questions to secretaries.
Leader of Assembly Business.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Are you hearing me?
No.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Good afternoon. There are 4 questions for oral answer, and the members of the majority side are able to respond to all 4 questions in this afternoon's sitting. Thank you.
Minority Councillor.
Presiding Officer. Question number 14.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Question number 14 to the Chief Secretary. Mr. Fali Chavez Augustine.
Chief Secretary.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. As it relates to question number 14, which reads, as it relates to the official overseas travel of the Deputy Chief Secretary to Miami, Dubai, and New York, can the Chief Secretary indicate the following? A, whether reports were submitted for each trip as promised. Reports were submitted for the Miami and the New York trips.
Follow up, Madam Presiding Officer. Follow up, Madam Presiding Officer.
Sorry, I did not hear you.
Follow up, Madam Presiding Officer. Follow up question.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, can the member indicate why there was no report for Dubai? And if so, when will the report?
Can you repeat that for me, Minority Counsel? I'm sure everyone didn't hear. You heard? Okay. You're able to respond to that, Chief Secretary? Okay. Chief Secretary.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. I cannot at this time say why a report for Dubai was not submitted. And as for when that will be submitted, I think the councillor opposite might do well to ask their newfound colleague, a member on their side, as to when he will submit same.
Madam Presiding Officer, one follow-up, please. Follow-up, Madam Presiding Officer.
Okay.
Madam Presiding Officer, to the member, can the member also make the reports that are currently available public?
She asks if the reports can be made public. Chief Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. More than making them public, I can have them forwarded to your office as well.
Okay. Minority Leader.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Question number 15 to the Chief Secretary, the Honorable Mr. Fali Chavez Augustine.
Chief Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. As it relates to the Little Tobago Jetty, can the Chief Secretary confirm the following? The process utilized to select the contractor for the project, the name and address of the contractor, and the contract sum at the time of the contract was awarded, and if you or any member of the executive met with the contractor prior to the award of the contract. The Speyside tourism stakeholders led by Sean Robinson of Tobago Dive and inclusive of representatives of all the reef boat operators, scuba dive shops, tour guides, restaurateurs, and guest house owners presented the Division of Infrastructure, Quarries and Urban Development with a proposal in December for a quick and efficient repair to the Little Tobago Jetty that will not require the driving of piles or an extension of the jetty, and thereby no need for an EMA certificate of environmental clearance. This was to allow them to be able to have the jetty for some usage in Easter season of 2022 after missing many peak seasons. This proposal came with drawings from an established contractor that previously worked on the Speyside mainland jetty and the building of the Roxborough jetty. The division at that time already had an existing proposal of $3.1 million. It was reviewed, and that proposal was compared with the one received from the community stakeholders. And the decision was made by the division to go with the one presented by the community stakeholders. The name of the contractor is Mackerel and Associates Limited. The address of the contractor, number 7 Hillcrest Drive, Pitty Valley, Trinidad, contracted sum $449,200, VAT exclusive, a difference or saving of approximately $2.65 million. A singular meeting was held between the Secretary in the Division of Infrastructure with the principals at Macquarie and Associates, and that meeting was held on the 1st of February 2022.
Can the Chief Secretary confirm whether he himself has a personal relationship with the contractor?
Madam
Chief Secretary.
Yes, sure. Madam Presiding Officer, I can confirm that I do not have a personal relationship with the contractor. I heard of that contractor sometime in 2019, early 2020, when the stakeholder team brought the proposal to my attention as the then area representative. And that was the first time I heard of this contractor. But I do not have a relationship with the contractor at all.
Madam Presiding Officer, seeing that the Chief Secretary is now saying that this stakeholder meeting was in 2020 and the Division of Infrastructure would have engaged the process in 2021 with another, which was utilizing another contractor, then how did the Chief Secretary have this engagement? Can he bring some clarity as to how he would have had this engagement with this said contractor?
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. The community of Speyside was incensed that after nearly 20 years, the promise of repairing the jetty at Little Tobago was not done. The stakeholders, the community, and let me repeat, the persons involved, reef boat operators, scuba dive shops, tour guides, restaurateurs, guest house owners, they met sometime late in that year, 2020, and they decided that they will start to pool their monies together to repair the jetty themselves. In fact, the intention of the community was to go behind the back of the Division of Infrastructure and repair the jetty without the division having any knowledge or express permission of same. After the election in 2021, the stakeholders who at that time was still unable to raise all the monies required came to the division with that said proposal, and at which time I asked the secretary for the division to treat with the matter and have the division consider both proposals. In fact, it was only upon getting into office that we learned that there was, in fact, a plan to treat with the Little Tobago jetty, a $3.1 million plan. The division looked at both plans, juxtaposed them, and decided to change the scope of works and went with the cheaper plan.
It is important to note that the plan the Chief Secretary speaks to is a temporary adjustment to the situation, whereas the 3.1...
Is that a question?
Is there a question? The 3.1 million he refers to...
Is there a question?
It was a complete arrangement, and therefore, I want to
Please ask the question, my lord.
Therefore, I would want the Chief Secretary to...
Point of order, Madam Speaker. A question must be asked.
Please. Minority, is there a question you're getting to?
What is the status of this project, seeing that the the decision of the division was that we would have had this project ready in time for Easter? We are now at the point of September. We would have missed Easter, we missed summer. And now I'm asking, what is the status of this project?
Understood. Chief Secretary.
Sure. I am happy to see that the stakeholders did not miss Easter of 2022, because at that juncture, after a very long time, the reef boats could actually dock safely at the jetty. Currently, the jetty now has railings that it did not have before. One can dock at the jetty, and the division now has some on-land works to complete, because beyond the jetty, the division used its staff to repair the house there, to do the trails, to do railings on the trails. And so while the jetty aspect is now more or less completed, on the island itself is about 95% completed on the island itself, separate and apart from the jetty. And I would love to invite the minority leader to join me on a tour. I will be happy to take him on a tour so he could see the facility if he was so obliged.
Minority Leader, any further questions? Can you please, short, or else you will have to put it in writing? Okay, thank you.
Can the Chief Secretary confirm whether there is any variation to the agreed contracted sum?
Chief Secretary?
I'm not in a position to confirm that. He may wish to direct that question to the Secretary for Infrastructure. So I won't be able to say that from where I sit.
I think that's fair enough, Minority Leader. So we move on. Next question.
Question number 16 to the Secretary of the Division of Education, Research and Technology, Assemblyman Zorisha Hackett.
Ms. Hackett.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Question. As it relates to the school repair program, can the Secretary indicate the process by which contractors were engaged? The procurement unit, in collaboration with the project implementation unit, under the guidance of the Administrator of the Division of Education, Research and Technology, commenced the execution of the school repair program for July-August 2022. In alignment with the Tobago House of Assembly's desire to encourage local content by the way of contractor engagement, contractors were selected to be invited to tender for projects within their electoral districts on the island. Procurement and PIU examined the PCO listing of pre-qualified contractors and selected contractors for invitation to tender based on their registered location and the financial capacity as indicated in the PCO office listing of pre-qualified contractors. The selected tender process began in July as contractors were invited to attend site visits and was subsequently issued tender documents to utilize in submitting their quotations. The quotations were received via tender box deposits and were opened and registered by senior officers within DIRTEC. The Tender Evaluation Committee was formed by the Administrator, comprising of senior subject matter experts from different divisions throughout the THA. They evaluated the quotations based on the criteria listed in the request for quotations issued to contractors. The evaluation reports were submitted to the Evaluation Subcommittee, who subsequently approved the recommendations for award of contracts. Negotiations were conducted with contractors to ensure that their quotations were within internal budget and letters of award were issued subsequently. Subject to the evaluation process of the Phase 1 works, it was noted that time was a challenge and the extensive procurement process for invitation, selection, evaluation, and award would render the process ineffective, as it would not allow for the completion of the contracted works in time for the reopening of schools on September 5th, 2022. Especially considering the magnitude of the works and the number of packages that DIRTEC wanted to execute. As a result, the Executive Council, by way of ECM number 332, dated August 10th, 2022, which I have in my possession right here, Madam Presiding Officer, a decision was made to continue the remaining SRP projects by selecting the schools where high priority works were identified and assigning contractors to each school to complete said works. A sole select tender process was therefore utilized with the justification that it was exigent circumstances that required works to be completed as a matter of urgency. the Executive Council approved the engagement of PCO-registered contractors within the construction industry on the island of Tobago, with the criteria for selection being that the contractors would, 1, have the financial resources to commence works without a mobilization fee, 2, have the necessary resources to mobilize and commence the works immediately, 3, be able to complete the works within the limited time frame requested, and 4, provide high-quality results. To ensure that the criteria was met, a contingent of contractors was selected based on assessments conducted from divisions within the THA, with the focus for recommendation being the contractor's track record of completing projects within the specific time frame, within budget, and to industry standards. The contractors were invited to site visits with a specific deadline to provide quotations via tender box deposit. The quotations were opened, registered, and evaluated by senior officers within DIRTEC. The subcommittee conducted the reviews, negotiations were completed, and letters of award were issued subsequently. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer.
Minority Leader.
Madam Presiding Officer, to my dear friend from Bethesda, Plymouth, Bethesda Lekutu, can the Secretary confirm whether in terms of the sole selection process, if any new contractor, and by new I mean contractors who had not, according to the requirement of sole selection, provided any previous service to the division? Were there any such situation where there were new contractors added to the pool of sole selected contractors?
Madam Presiding Officer, it seems as if the Minority Leader has more information than I do. I just expressed that these contractors needed to have a track record of executing works within the THA, and I would like to urge the Minority Leader to pay attention to the news of fake profiles. Thank you.
Madam Presiding Officer, I again repeat, can the Secretary confirm yes or no?
Madam Presiding Officer, no.
Members, this is not a debate.
Madam Presiding Officer, no. Thank you.
Madam Presiding Officer, follow up. Can the Secretary confirm whether she herself sat in any of those tender processes at the time of the evaluation?
Minority Leader, are you inciting that the Secretary or the member is exclusive?
I'm simply asking a question, Madam Presiding Officer.
Okay.
Madam Presiding Officer,
Secretary?
That is the exact question I wanted to ask the Minority Leader. Are you inciting that I was a part of the procurement process, Minority Leader?
This is not a debate, members.
Yes or no?
A simple question, a simple answer would
Madam
suffice.
Presiding Officer, may I take my seat, please? Thank you.
Minority Leader.
Madam Presiding Officer, I simply repeat, can the Honorable Secretary confirm or deny?
No.
Thank you. Moving on.
No, Madam Presiding
Minority
Officer.
Leader. Next question. This is not a debate.
No, I'm
if
not
you
debating,
require,
it's just a
Minority
follow-up
Leader, if you require any follow-up questions to be answered in its totality, I suggest you direct your question to the Secretary of Education, Research and Technology. Minority Leader, next question.
Question number 17 to the Secretary of the Division of Tourism, Culture, Antiquities and Transportation.
Secretary, Councillor Boris, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Question. As it relates to the recently held Tobago House of Assembly sponsored Utopia Jazz Experience, can the Secretary indicate the following? Whether the Tobago House of Assembly through the Tobago Tourism Agency Limited made arrangements for a chartered flight for performing artists, and what cost was incurred by the Tobago Tourism Agency Limited to charter the flight. Owing to the absence of sufficient flights between the islands, the principals who promoted the Tobago Jazz Utopia experience found themselves in a situation where they could not get the performing acts into the island to satisfy requirements for that event. They reached out to the Tobago House of Assembly with their challenge, and the Tobago House of Assembly responded positively by way of sponsorship. That sponsorship was in the form of the charter for a flight for those performing acts to get into the island. The contract negotiations were done by the Senior State Council, the Protocol Department of the Office of the Chief Secretary, and co-signed by the Chief Administrator and the Chief Secretary on June 17, 2022. The Tourism Agency Limited was asked to service the charter bill, as it is the only agency with a vote dedicated for paying charters and for air service agreements. The cost of that charter was $30,000 US or 203,979 TT dollars. Thank you.
Wow, Madam Presiding Officer, in a place where people cannot get basic food items,
Madam
cards,
Is there a question?
Members, Minority Leader, please ask your question.
This hurts me because 210,000 TT to charter. How many artists?
That is not a question.
How many artists
Members,
did we pay 210,000 to?
Minority Leader, that is not a question.
I'm
Please
asking the question
get to
now.
the question. Thank you.
How many artists did this 210,000 hard-earned taxpayers' dollars covered? How many persons were brought over on this flight?
Councillor Burris.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. I do not have that information at hand. However, if you wish to reach out to the principals, Opulence Events, I think you know them very well. They are your friends. They can indicate to you who was brought over on that chartered flight. In any case, the THA has a responsibility to all promoters in this space to ensure that not only the Tobago House of Assembly has events, but we encourage promoters to have events on the island's event and festivals calendar to contribute to our tourism product. The THA was a minor sponsor of this event. That was a minor cost compared to what we would normally spend for our jazz festivals, somewhere in the region of $15 and $18 million. This event was hosted as a result of our absence of having jazz this year, and I see that as an investment that the THA has made to ensure that promoters on the island can have quality events to ensure that we could bring visitors to the island. Thank you.
Councillor Burris, I believe he asked who. Did you answer that part?
I did answer that part.
Because I'm not hearing too well up here.
Yes, I did answer. I said that I don't have that information at hand, but it can be provided subsequently.
Okay, thank you. Minority Leader, any follow-up questions?
So we can't pay ex gratia, but we have enough money to
Minority
pay.
Leader.
No, I'm just asking, so we have enough money to pay to charter a flight?
That is not a question, Minority Leader.
Okay, thank you.
Questions for written answers. In accordance with Standing Order 21.3, honorable members, the written responses from Mr. Trevor James, Assemblyman Trevor James, Assemblyman Fali Chavez Augustine, and Assemblyman Natisha Charles Pantin would be circulated at the next sitting.
Request for leave to move the adjournment of the Assembly on definite matters of urgent public importance. Statements by secretaries or assistant secretaries.
Leader of Assembly Business.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. I rise to move a motion to have Standing Order 29-2 suspended to allow the Chief Secretary and Secretary of Finance, Trade and the Economy to present his statement in its entirety.
Honorable members, the question put is that we suspend Standing Order 29-2 to allow the Chief Secretary and Secretary for Finance, Trade and the Economy to present his statements. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any against? The ayes have it. Chief Secretary, you may present your statement.
Madam Presiding Officer, similarly, I would like to rise on Standing Order 91-1 to ask this Honorable House to also join me in suspending part of Standing Order 29-3, where the opposition party would be allowed, given that the Chief Secretary will be speaking for a lengthier time than 10 minutes, allowed more than the one question that is allowed at the end. So we are asking if we will be allowed to ask about 5 questions, given the fact that the statement usually is 10 minutes, and therefore the standing order would have catered for such. But we are asking, because he's going to give we are waiving the standing order to allow him to speak longer. So we are also asking if, in all fairness, that we are allowed additional questions.
So you want me to put that to the House? Okay. Members, the question is, standing order, we waive standing order 29, 29-3? 3? 29-3. For the asking of questions at the end of the statement process. All in favor, say aye.
Madam Presiding Officer, may we have a specific number of questions to be asked, please?
I did ask for 5, please.
You are asking for 5? For 5 questions to be asked at the end of this statement by the Chief Secretary. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any against? Chief Secretary, we are all in consensus that at the end of the statement, the minority bench would be able to ask 5 questions. Is that clear, minority?
Thank you again.
Okay. Proceed, Chief Secretary.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Presiding Officer. Thank you, members. I wish to welcome back to this House for our first regular sitting post the statutory or the mandatory July-August recess. I also wish to take this opportunity to bid good afternoon to not just all members present in the House, but also to all Tobagonians looking on with keen interest, and those from further afield. And I believe, Madam Presiding Officer, that this is one of the most important sittings that this legislature will have in this calendar year. Madam Presiding Officer, I wish to inform this Honorable House of the preliminary report submitted on the 9th of September 2022 by Caribbean Institute of Forensic Accounting. The firm engaged by the Tobago House of Assembly to conduct the forensic audit into the 5 development programs under the then DIQE and DFPFF. Madam Presiding Officer, CIFA, or Caribbean Institute of Forensic Accounting, their lead engagement partner is the head and founder of CIFA Consulting and the head of investigation at Baker & Partners in the United Kingdom. He is also one of 5 experts in the world selected by the International Bar Association Asset Recovery Subcommittee, and has served as an advisor in the implementation of asset recovery in the Caribbean and East Africa. He is also a certified fraud examiner and forensic auditor with 18 years experience. His professional affiliations include the International Bar Association, the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, the Institute of Internal Control Auditors, the Forensic CPA Society, United States of America, and the Caribbean Institute of Forensic Accounting. In other words, the main principal is more than expertly qualified to do this job. Today, Madam Presiding Officer, I will present this report by taking you through this condensed yet comprehensive version of the preliminary report, headlined in the following areas: background of the engagement and the findings, the procurement process, examination of the contractual agreements, examination of the contractual costs, examination of the engineer's estimates, inflation of material quantities, apparent mismanagement of funds, apparent overpayment of funds, the conclusion to this said report. Further, I will be using this opportunity to share openly with this House the steps taken by a few nefarious characters to derail this presentation in this House at this time, and the most progressive step taken by this country, by this state chair leading as an example in our effort to tackle the problem of corruption head-on. We need back those wooden desks, Madam Presiding Officer. The report, the base of the report is 90 pages long, exclusive of the appendices. I wish to also indicate at the very start of this presentation, Madam Presiding Officer, that at this time, only a handful of public servants are in receipt of copies of this report. Even as I am presenting this report, I have not given a single copy to any member of my team. We kept this report as close to our chest as possible because there remain 3 steps which I will not identify that must be taken by the examiners and the auditors, which will then allow for us to move from the reporting stage to the public, to move to the place where we can report this matter to the relevant authorities to treat it as a criminal matter. I wish to also begin in the most unusual manner. Unusual, and if you will allow me, the standing orders require that I speak to and through you, Madam Presiding Officer. But allow me to speak directly to the team I lead at the start of this presentation. I hear they're calling us Farley and friends now. In circumstances like this one, it is quite usual for the one making the presentation and the team in power to use the opportunity to berate the team that preceded it and the team guilty of the incursions. And yes, there will be points of the presentation where that will be done. But I want from the onset of this presentation to admonish the team I lead and to let the team I lead understand that the same rule that applies to those that this report will reveal have either defrauded or attempted to defraud the government and people of Tobago applies to all of us too. And as much as this signals what happened in the past, this is very much a warning to all of us that form part of a significant majority. You take the same kinds of actions, and I will be left with no choice but to take the same kinds of actions against you. Madam Presiding Officer, the Executive Council of the Tobago House of Assembly, via Exec Council Minute number 51 of February 9th, 2022, approved the execution of an independent forensic audit into the following specific development projects under the divisions of Infrastructure, Quarries and Urban Development and the Division of Food Security, Natural Resources, the Environment and the Sustainable Development for the period October 1, 2019 to November 30th, 2021, namely Road Restoration Program, Road Resurfacing Program, Emergency Restoration Works Program, Emergency Infrastructure Rehabilitation Program, and the Agriculture Access Roads Program. Madam Presiding Officer, it's important to note that a phased approach is being used to execute this audit because of the quantum and the different levels of work that is required for the investigation. Accordingly, for the purpose of this report, the examiner looked at the road resurfacing program. Let's get that clear. This first report we have received is on the road resurfacing program. The auditors are still working on their reports for the road restoration program, the emergency restoration works program, the emergency infrastructure rehabilitation program, and the agriculture access roads program. We expect all reports before the end of calendar year 2022. Madam Presiding Officer, the forensic audit examination included reviews of relevant records, analysis of policies, procedures and regulations, interviews, and witness statements from appropriate personnel. The forensic examination included a review of the overall decision-making process regarding DIQE's road restoration and resurfacing program for fiscal year 2020-2021. Remember, there are 4 other programs for which we have not received the reports as yet. So this is for the road restoration and resurfacing program for fiscal year 2020-2021. In this regard, decisions were taken by the Executive Council, which had a major impact on the program and can be found in ECM, that's Executive Council Minute number 9 of January 6, 2021, wherein the Executive Council considered, agreed, and approved the recommendations made by DIQE. Executive Council number 8, which asked, 1, that ECM number 423 of November 4th, 2020 be amended to include Executive Council approval for DIQE's use of specific contractors on the road construction rehabilitation program, DIQE, financial year 2020-2021, and 2, that said road works valued at $206,468,925 be allocated in stated percentages between those specific contractors. Appendix 3 to the note, Executive Council 8, that is, which listed 80 roads to be resurfaced, also identified 3 specific contractors, only 3, and showed the respective suggested allocation of the roadworks between these 3. In other words, Madam Presiding Officer, the former executive did not just agree to do these projects, but also made the decision on the selection of the 3 contractors to do 80 roads. Madam Presiding Officer, a basic understanding of road resurfacing is as follows. Resurfacing of asphalt involves the placing of new asphalt over existing surface. This is typically required to restore asphalt or correct some other defect usually restricted to the upper asphalt layer. In Trinidad and Tobago, resurfacing is used to correct minor cracking, fatigued asphalt, rotting, and skidding issues, and extend the life of the asphalt pavement. Asphalt used in resurfacing is typically made from a combination of fine and coarse aggregate. The aggregate will be combined with bitumen in specific proportions to produce asphalt which meets the agency's specifications. And that's so that we are very clear as to the kind of work that we are talking about and that we either paid for or are to pay for. Madam Presiding Officer, I now turn to the executive summary, the procurement process. The examiner commenced the examination by reviewing the procurement process used by DIQE to get a firm understanding of the process. The examiner found that DIQE did not apply the typical tendering of 3 quotation process to the special bonded rate system. Notwithstanding this, as noted above, the Executive Council approved the use of specified 3 contractors and specific allocations of work to them. However, the examiner was not provided, or in other words, there exists no detailed written or oral information, including on the DIQE's senior staff's technical deliberations, which drove the use of specific or specified bonded contractors and allocation of works as recommended in note number 2 and EC 8. In other words, there exists no explanation of how they arrived at these 3 contractors, and there was no justification for why the usual 3 quotes or 3 company rule wasn't used in this instance. Madam Presiding Officer, there exists in the technical deliberations of the senior staff at DIQE no explanation similar to what the Secretary of Education gave today. And so the examiner found a lack of information in that regard. Since the selection process did not follow a typical procurement process, none of the usual supporting documents, such as the request for proposal, evaluation report, letter of award, that will usually accompany such typical process and from which details of costs could be obtained, were available upon request, nor has to date been received for examination. In addition, the contracts contained, none of the contracts, not one of the contracts, contained a detailed breakdown of costs. To put it in simple words, these findings seem to suggest that no competitive tendering process for 80 road projects valued at $206 million. It also suggests that the contractors were handpicked and the $206 million in road resurfacing works was shared among them on the approval of the last Executive Council. No technical or other justification was found to support the decision and the method used to share the $206 million in contract among the 3 selected contractors. Examination of the contractual arrangement. So we're looking at the contractual arrangements now. Upon examination, none of the contracts used by DIQE for the road resurfacing works contained critical items that government agencies typically use and rely upon for protection. These critical key terms and details of key documents that would normally be included in such contracts are as follows. And I need for everyone to listen carefully, because whether it's sole select, selective tendering, open tendering, these are typical elements of contracts, and none of these, Madam Presiding Officer, were contained in the contracts issued. 1, specifications or drawings depicting the scope of works location and or boundaries of the site, nor any setting out of relevant data, tests conducted, and samples of materials used. So no scope of work, no drawing, no specifications, no boundaries identified. So God alone knows how they find them. Secondly, contractual provisions dealing with safety or quality assurance. That's not existent in the contracts. The commencement date of the contracts and or its duration, completion date, were not defined in these contracts. The bill of quantities breaking down the contract sum to be used to remeasure the works or to value variations to the works, not existent in these contracts. Contractual provisions dealing with who had responsibility for insurance of the works, i.e. the Tobago House of Assembly, DIQE, or the contractor. This suggests that the works may have been uninsured. Contractual provision allowing the THA to give instructions or make variations to the works. Such a variation clause is particularly useful as there would be no need to modify the contract or vary the scope of the contract if required. But none of that exists in the contracts that were given. Contractual provisions for extending time and associated costs subject to, depending on uncontrollable third-party delays that are non-compensable, or the THA DIQE delays that may be compensable, that will include force majeure events such as natural disasters, pandemics, etc., not included in the contracts. Contractual provisions dealing with liquidated damages for late completion caused by contractor delays, know about in the contracts. Contractual provisions setting out detailed obligations of THA representatives, know about in the contracts. Contractual provisions for regular process reports and or other features by which the contractor might support their payment applications, non-existent. There were no payment terms in the contract. Let me repeat that. There were no payment terms in the contracts, including for advance payments covered by the advance payment bond, timing of contractor application for payment, withholding payment for defective work or assembly claims, or retention of payment until the end of maintenance period, etc. None of that existed in the contracts given. Contractual provision for the contractor to provide a performance bond as security for their completion of work, not in the contracts. Contractual provision for less expensive dispute resolution methods, such as mediation through dispute adjudication boards, also non-existent. Simply put, Madam Presiding Officer, there were no proper written contractual arrangements between the contractors and DIQE to protect the public interest in $206 million in road resurfacing works, which were given out to 3 selected contractors. In fact, Madam Presiding Officer, I will shock you by telling you that the majority of the contracts remain unsigned. The majority of the contracts are written, but they remain unsigned. Unsigned. Let's examine the contractual costs. With what I just stated, the examiner sought to therefore reconcile the contracted prices with the engineer's estimates, taking into consideration the DIQE apparent special bonded rate system for road paving. There were 80 projects in the DIQE road resurfacing works program, of which the examiner was presented with 78 contracts. 78. No contracts were produced for 2 of the projects, and as indicated, the majority of these 78 contracts remain unsigned to this day. The examiner found that 96% of the 78 contracts, signed or unsigned, produced or priced, or the prices, could be fully reconciled with the engineer's estimates. Let me read that again. The examiner found that 96% of the 78 contracts, signed or unsigned, the contract price could be fully reconciled, or 100% the very same price as the engineer's estimates. The remaining 4% that could not be fully reconciled were on average plus 3% to minus 9% difference from the engineer's estimates. These results indicate that the engineer's estimates were used to determine the prices of the contracts, signed or unsigned. So there was apparently no negotiations, no requests of the 3 special blue-eyed contractors to provide any quotation. But for 96% of the works done, the prices on the eventual contracts, both signed and unsigned contracts, were identical to the internal estimates done by the engineer. Given such circumstances, the examiner then sought to test the accuracy of the engineer's estimates. So since the 96% of them were 100% reconciled with the internal engineer's estimates, the next best option for the examiner, that came from the auditing firm, was to look at the actual accuracy of the engineer's estimates. Of initial concern, Madam Presiding Officer, is that the engineer's estimate shows an estimated average cost of $848.14 per square meter over an estimated total of 216,474.51 square meters for the entire 80 road projects. This compares very unfavorably to an estimated average cost of $700 per square meter over the entire project produced in the independent cost experts' estimates as the average cost for road resurfacing in Tobago, which we have grown to expect to be a bit higher than in Trinidad. In other words, when the examiner asked an independent cost expert to redo the estimates done by the engineer internally and to line it up with the going rate for Tobago at that time, it is found that the average cost for Tobago is $700 per square meter. Yet the engineer's estimates ran us at $848.14 per square meter. The latter estimate was derived from guidelines, that is the $700. That estimate was derived from guidelines set out in the International Standard Method of Measurement of Building Works 7, known as SMM7, and the Institute of Surveyors of Trinidad and Tobago. So the auditors did their work. They found an independent cost expert. They took the International Standard Method for Measurement of Building Works 7 and the Institute of Surveyors of Trinidad and Tobago and got an accurate average cost of $700 per square meter for road resurfacing in Tobago, while the engineers' estimates, to which the contracts signed and unsigned were pegged fully, was at $848.14 per square meter. Therefore, Madam Presiding Officer, when the total square meters for the 80 projects were multiplied, first by the cost of $700 per square meter, as estimated by the independent cost expert, totaling $151.5 million. Secondly, the engineer's estimate at $848.14 per square meter, total $183.8 million. That results in a difference or a reduction of the estimated total costs of approximately $32.1 million. In other words, the difference between the engineer's inflated estimates and the real estimates as per the independent cost experts was a difference of $32.1 million. So you see, we're going down from the $206 million. With the above in mind, Madam Presiding Officer, the examiner reconciled, therefore, the quantities of materials in DIQE engineers' estimates against those shown by the independent cost expert to understand how we come up with the $32.1 million difference. Because the independent cost expert wanted to know if it's by OBIA we come up with the prices, or if somebody just get a dream and write it down. So they looked at the quantities of materials in the engineer's estimates against those of their very own, in order to ascertain whether the differences were reasonable. The results shows that except for 2 mm coarse sand, the DIQE engineers' estimates were for all other materials except for 2 mm coarse sand. For all other materials, the engineers' estimates were over-quantified to the independent cost experts' estimates based on the square meter requirements. And that's because, Madam Presiding Officer, resurfacing a road is science. And you could pretty much use a scientific method to determine how much materials are needed. And it was found by the examiner, Madam Presiding Officer, that except for 2 mm coarse sand, the DIQE engineers' estimates for all other materials were over-quantified. In other words, the engineer put plenty extra materials in there. Madam Presiding Officer, I share with you now inflation of material quantities. The differences in the estimated quantities between the independent cost expert and the apparent over-quantification by the DIQA engineer ranging from 19% to 53% were when reconciled as an adjustment to the total project costs and overall inflation or reduction of the accumulated contract costs by an estimated $79.8 million. So we spoke about the $32.1 million, which was based on an overestimation in the cost per square meter to do a road. Then the auditors looked at the actual materials used, the materials written down by the engineer in his estimates, and found that inflation in the amount of materials required comes up to $79.8 million. And let me give you some specifics, Madam Presiding Officer. Crusher run by the metric ton the engineer's estimate was over quantified by 16,881.73 metric tons, or a cost of $3.472 million, or 19%. CRS2, bituminous emulsion by the gallon. The engineer's quantities were overestimated by 19,567.48, which is a cost of $1.862 million, or 21%. Rotten rock by the metric ton. The engineer's estimates in quantities were over by 78,183.36 metric tons, or a value of $13.4 million, or 43%. Hot mix asphalt by the metric ton. The engineer's estimate was over by 46,639.11 metric tons, or an estimated cost of $61.094 million, or 53%, totaling $79,833,291.85 to the dollar. That's the estimated cost, Madam Presiding Officer, of the over-quantification of materials in the engineer's estimates. And bear in mind that the contract price for 96% of them were identical to the engineer's estimates. We go now to apparent mismanagement of funds. Arising, Madam Presiding Officer, from the reconciliation of estimated quantities determined by the independent cost experts and DIQE's engineer, which resulted in an inflation or reduction of the accumulated contract costs by an estimated $79.8 million, the examiner concluded, this is the auditor's talking now, the examiner concluded that it was necessary to conduct site visits for the remeasurement of works. Particular attention was given to the remeasurement of the hot mix asphalt, which accounted for 79% of the estimated reduction of the total project costs. So we didn't take it for granted, Madam Presiding Officer, that the independent cost expert was saying it was over-quantified. The decision was made to go and look at the actual roads, Madam Presiding Officer, and to do the necessary quantity surveying to see what was actually used. 21 randomly selected roads of the 80 road projects were selected for remeasurement testing. This represents a 45% testing random sample of the total project costs. The auditors selected the 21 most expensive roads to do their testing. So that results to 43% of the sample of the total project costs. Of concern is the fact that the estimated difference for the overqualification of hot mix for each of the 21 road projects tested, and by extension, all of the 80 road projects, that estimation was exactly 53%, despite the area of each road project being different in size and nature. Let me say that again. Of concern is the fact that the estimated difference for the over-quantification of hot mix asphalt, which I just pointed out, the engineer overestimated by 43,639.11 metric tons, and a difference in project cost of 61.094 million. That for all of the 80 roads, that overcalculation was exactly 53%, despite the area of each road project being different in size and nature. I opine, Madam Presiding Officer, that perhaps that engineer should be the Minister of Finance, because it would appear that that engineer accurately calculated the true costs for the hot mix and purposefully inflated all by exactly 53%. The maths ain't mathsing. Well, I guess for them it mathsing out. But for the people of Tobago, it ain't mathsing. Madam Presiding Officer, of utmost concern is the fact, and I need to go slow here, of utmost concern, Madam Presiding Officer, is the fact that there was no evidence of any scheduled works having been commenced or in progress. Let me use simpler words. There was no evidence of any work at all being commenced or having begun or start or in progress or in train on 11 of the 21 road projects selected for remeasurement. Notwithstanding that fact, Madam Presiding Officer, let me say that again, 11 of the 21 roads selected by random, the auditors selected the 21 most expensive roads, 40 that accounted for some 41%, Madam Presiding Officer, of the total cost of 206 million, 21 roads. And of the 21 roads, Madam Presiding Officer, 11 of them ain't get no work that start or no work in progress. Notwithstanding that fact, Madam Presiding Officer, these 11 roads unbelievably have certification of completion, or they form, or, and you're brazen and bold, some of these thieves are. They either had certificate of completion, or they form part of claims being made by contractors, even in the court. Adding to that concern, Madam Presiding Officer, is the fact that 4 of these 11 roads, 4 of these 11 road projects were referenced in the Tobago House of Assembly vote book account 15/09/003/15/D/690. The vote book, for those who don't know, is an accounting book used in the public sector to track and monitor expenditure and to ensure that there is no extra budgetary spending. Madam Presiding Officer, 4 of these 11 projects from that vote book that I just quoted have been paid for in full at an amounting to $15.5 million, Madam Presiding Officer. So not only did they overestimate the quantities to be used to some 79.8 million, not only did the engineers estimate for doing the road for over 800 million when the true value was, over $800 when the true value was $700, resulting in over $30 million in overage. Unbelievably, Madam Presiding Officer, we pay for 4 roads that end yet. $15.5 million at THA. And people in this house will stand and talk about hard-earned taxpayers' dollars. Right? Asking Madam Presiding Officer for their ex gratia payments after they knock it left, right, and center during the election. But $15.5 million paid out, and the road ain't do it. Fully paid. I am paid for the road. It was paid for by your party that was in power. Already paid before we came into office. Madam Presiding Officer, let me go to the apparent overpayment of funds. Madam Presiding Officer, a total of 10 road projects were remeasured and asphalt cutting tested. These 10 projects total 49,643.99 square meters per the engineer's estimate. The remeasurement was obtained through geomatics, surveying instruments such as a total station and data collectors to get and store data measurements of the roadway and upload it to AutoCAD. The roadway was plotted with precise area measurements and was calculated by the program using plotted data points. Further, Madam Presiding Officer, the winding road lengths were also measured accurately using the program. The roadways were cored at 2 arbitrary points to retrieve coring samples. In other words, they dig a small hole, not the size like what Wassadas want to dig. They dig a small hole, pull up the sample so that they can check the layers placed on the road. The method used to calculate the depth data was the 2 samples taken. Of concern, Madam Presiding Officer, the remeasured square meters footage for the 10 road projects was 23,065.40 square meters when compared to DIQE's engineer's estimate of 49,643.99 square meters, a difference or a shortage of 26,578.42 square meters. the remeasured 10 road projects showed shortages ranging from 462.33 square meters to 6,142.27 square meters. The accumulated shortages in the 10 roadwork projects of 26,578.42 square meters amount to an estimated difference of approximately 22.7 million or 27% of the total project costs. Let me break it down simply, Madam Presiding Officer. We asked contractors to pave 49,643.99 square meters of road. They only do 23,065.40 square meters, which results in about $22.7 million. And you know what is the case? What are the facts, Madam Presiding Officer? We have certificate of completions. We have contractors. And might I add, we have minority voices demanding that we pay people for works that they did not do.
Standing orders where this member is imputing improper motives. Sorry, 45.5.
Who are the members he's imputing improper motive
the
against?
members of the minority of which I am a part.
Madam Presiding Officer, prepared to withdraw and rephrase.
Please do.
The minority held a press conference telling Tobagonians that the Chief Secretary should pay the contractors, pay them the money. That time, Madam Presiding Officer, the contractors trying to thief out the eye of Tobagonians. Let him take ownership of that.
Madam Presiding Officer, based on 45.5, I made no such pronouncement, and I'm asking the member to withdraw that statement.
Member, continue. Withdraw and continue.
Madam Presiding Officer, I am prepared to withdraw, and I'm also prepared outside of the parliamentary privilege here to make the said statement outside. Because I not only have courthouse closed, I have courthouse evidence.
You promised to pay the people,
Madam Presiding
and all
Officer,
I asked for
members,
you
members, I am
Is that
on
a
my
standing
feet.
is that a point of order?
Members,
Right.
members, Chief Secretary and my...
Madam Presiding Officer?
Listen to me.
Yes. Thank you.
Listen. I have no qualms in putting people out of this house. None whatsoever. You withdraw the statement?
I withdraw the statement.
Continue, please.
Madam Presiding Officer, it was found that 7 of these 10 road projects we measured were referenced in THA's vote book account 15/09/003/15D690 as having been paid for in full. These payments amount to 32.3 million or 22.7 million over what we should have paid. So not only did they give us short road, we paid them for what was written in the engineer's estimates. They had completion, certificates of completion, and unbelievably, you telling me nobody checked to see that they did not complete the full amount of roadway as indicated in the contracts and the engineer's estimates. That, Madam Presiding Officer, amounts to fraud. It amounts to theft. It also amounts to collusion. And I'm putting this on the record. I am of the firm belief, Madam Presiding Officer, that these overpayments were used in an effort to swindle monies for an election campaign that happened in December, and they still get a tail cut. As it relates to the calculation of the hot mix asphalt, the actual square meter footage of the asphalt, of the hot mix asphalt, for the 10 roads were remeasured, Madam Presiding Officer, to 2,543.19 metric tons. In comparison, we're talking about actual work that we pay for, 2,543.19 metric tons of hot asphalt was used, in comparison to the engineer's estimate of 19,361.25 metric tons. This represents a calculated overestimated difference of 16,818.06 metric tons, which results in an estimated difference of approximately $23.5 million, or 45% of the total project costs. So the hot mix overestimate, they give a short road, they overestimate all the materials used in doing the road, and we just pay. And that's why from day one, Madam Presiding Officer, I indicated that we will pay. We will only pay a small part and wait on the audit report to determine how much more to be paid. Madam Presiding Officer, in recognition of the fact that the forensic audit is actively ongoing, and in acknowledgement of the strong findings pointing to possible organized, in fact, let me reframe this, pointing to actual organized criminal conduct, which seemingly may have involved active participation of very senior members, leaders, operatives, and business associates of the last administration. I ask again, how much of this overage in payments went back to fund PNM's failed political campaign? How much of this overestimation were paid forward to PNM's failed political campaign in hopes that they will win the election and get the money back on the back end? Madam Presiding Officer, it is unbelievable that not only have the THA paid for works not done, the THA paid for works that were underdone, the THA signed contracts that were super inflated, and yes, I know it's grammatically incorrect. Before Assemblyman Hackett points it out, it's grammatically incorrect to say super inflated, but it is with deliberateness that I use the term super inflated in this instance. And this, Madam Presiding Officer, explains the anxiety people have with trying to get all of their monies. Madam Presiding Officer, I am therefore constrained to conclude by only saying that this administration, my administration, Farley and Friends, stand resolutely committed to providing all the resources and administrative support to the independent forensic audit team towards ensuring that the audit is conducted with the level of efficiency, effectiveness necessary and required. As indicated, there are 3 steps remaining to be taken, for which I will not mention here for the integrity of the outcomes. When those 3 steps are completed, Madam Presiding Officer, there are a couple steps that I will take. Number 1, I will provide the evidence, Madam Presiding Officer, to the necessary law enforcement agencies for their follow-on investigation and interviewing of those that are so guilty. Number two, Madam Presiding Officer, I will be naming and shaming all of the contractors involved in this thing. Number three, Madam Presiding Officer, I wish to say that as an island, we have to take some steps to self-correct, because this matter has been going on for a long while. We have heard rumors before, we have heard talks before, and Madam Presiding Officer, we have evidence of the shenanigans at work. More importantly, Madam Presiding Officer, I wish to guarantee that anyone, and let me repeat, anyone who may be eventually culpable of any wrongdoing or criminal conduct, that they face the full and total weight of the laws of the land, and that every single penny, every single shilling unlawfully and illegally taken from the island's treasury be recovered and returned to Tobagonians. Madam Presiding Officer, one of the steps, the progressive steps that I wish to take is that I wish to ask of this House, ask of the Executive Council, that we eventually agree to set up our own whistleblower system in Tobago. I'm aware that the government tried in 2018, and that there is a pending 2022 proposal that requires the support of the opposition in Trinidad. But at the rate at which they are going at the House of Representatives and the Senate, it seems unlikely that we will get whistleblower legislation for the country anytime soon. And so I will be proposing that the THA establishes a core council of no more than 7 people, 7 upstanding Tobagonians, which must include among the 7 a trained investigator, someone who either retired or is active in service in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, a certified auditor or financial analyst, an attorney, an experienced attorney of law, a member of the clergy, and any other 3. And that this council be furnished with a web-based software to allow people to anonymously, to secretly submit any claims and accompanying documentary evidence without them being compromised, without their security being compromised. I recognize, Madam Presiding Officer, that the whistleblower legislation that we are supposed to get and that we have been talking about for a long time was meant to combat corruption and other wrongdoings by encouraging and facilitating disclosures of improper conduct in the public and private sector, to protect persons from making such disclosures from detrimental action, to regulate the receiving, investigating, or otherwise dealing with disclosures of improper conduct, and to provide for other matters connected therewith. I wish to also take this opportunity to invite the minority leader at some time of his choosing to join me in building out this proposal for THA's very own whistleblower legislation. Because this matter, Madam Presiding Officer, is not just the job of this team that is in power, but it must be the job and the duty of the entire Tobago House of Assembly. Madam Presiding Officer, I cannot end my reporting to the House without pointing out that on the road to today, several actions, inactions, steps were taken to attempt to derail this process, to stop me from presenting this information to the House. In fact, I could tell you, up to 9:56 p.m. last night, I saw a pre-action protocol letter coming in from one of the 3 contractors. Well, I cast it into the legal dustbin because that pre-action protocol letter did not worth the email it was sent on. And then on my way here, I saw another email threatening to go to court over the matter. Beyond that, Madam Presiding Officer, I wish to share with you verbatim a WhatsApp conversation that I had with someone from Trinidad, purporting to be one of the political colleagues of the former Deputy Chief Secretary. And she sent me first, Madam Presiding Officer, a screenshot of a conversation she was having with one of the 3 contractors for this particular project.
Just a point of clarification, please, Madam Presiding Officer. Can the Chief Secretary just clarify if the WhatsApp is part of the written statement?
The WhatsApp is part of the written statement, and we also waived the standing orders governing the sharing of statements in the House. We purposefully, as a House, decided a short while ago, we will waive the standing orders over the construct of statements in the House.
We were specific to 29.2 and 29.3.
Sorry?
The standing orders waived were 29.2, which allowed for the Honorable Chief Secretary to speak beyond the 10 minutes, and 29.3, which allowed me to ask more than one question.
What is the query? Sorry, I didn't hear.
Right, so the query, and I'm telling you, yes, I wrote it here, and I also wrote on the statement, read onto the records of the House directly from your phone in square brackets. Do you have my statement before you? Do you have my statement before you? Do you have my statement before you? And there is no requirement for this statement.
Please.
Madam Presiding Officer, there is no
Please.
requirement for the statement that is being read
Chief
to be
Secretary,
read.
is this part of the statement?
Yes, it is. And the statement.
Minority Leader, are you in receipt of a copy of the Chief Secretary's statement?
Well,
A copy would be provided to you, to everyone, I'm sure.
Correct.
At the end of this presentation.
Madam Presiding Officer, Standing Order 29.1 is clear. The Chief Secretary ought to have circulated you with a statement, and
Me.
so that, yes.
Me.
But she
Let
asked
me read
if she
29.1.
she asked if you have a copy.
Can I read 29.1,
Listen, I am not
please?
engaging in an argument with anyone.
Can I read
Continue.
29.1, please,
Minority,
Honorable?
please have a seat.
Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. And just to be clear, the format for a statement to be read in this House can be both on paper and also be electronical. It does not have to be all on paper. Madam Presiding Officer, and I understand.
Member, hold on.
Yeah.
Minority Leader, the last time anyone checked, I'm still the presiding officer. If he provided me with a copy of this statement, it is I am in receipt of it.
But that's
I am in receipt of the statement.
But does the statement reflect what he's claiming that
Chief Secretary, continue.
Madam Presiding Officer, I understand why some people in this House will not want necessary evidence to come before the people of Tobago. Yes, Madam Presiding Officer. And so in this conversation, a screenshot of a conversation being held between this young lady and one of the 3 contractors for this project was sent to my phone. And the message says, afternoon, message from name of contractor. And
This House stands suspended for 5 minutes.
Sampson. I am the Assemblyman for Bonaccord Crown Point. Also, I am the Deputy Presiding Officer of the Assembly Legislature. Added to that, I am the Assistant Secretary for the Division of Infrastructure, Quarries and Urban Development. My electoral district, it spans from Center Street, the western side of Center Street. So when you enter where the community center is, from the western side, that is your left hand, it spans from there straight down to the back of the airport, up to the park. It includes Gaskin Bay Road, it includes John Gorman Trees, Silk Cotton Trees, Storby Branch Road, Storby Local Road, parts of Killigwin. It also includes the Bonaccord Integrated Development, it includes Milford Court. My electoral office is located at number 11, Milford Bay Plaza, Crown Point. It's the cream and brown building, just opposite the Coliseum. The best thing about my electoral district, I think it's the clean, green, serene surrounding environment, you know. We have the wonderful beaches, we have Pigeon Point, we have Storby, you know, we have the famous strip as they call the Avenue. So, you know, everything is on the west side and persons love it and I do love it as well. You know, added to the sand, sea and the sun, there are the reef boat tours, you know, you go out to the beautiful Nyland pool, you engage in a bath on the reef. They say when you take a bath out there, you look 10 years younger. So anyone who wants to look 10 years longer, just come to Bonaccord Crown Point. Let's take you on an adventure, on a journey, so that you will look that way. I was born and bred in Milford Court. That's in the beautiful village of Bonaccord. You know, it's a nice development, a nice housing area where it was closely knit. We grew up in those days with love and unity. So if you didn't have, you could always go by the neighbor and you could get something. Growing up wasn't always easy. You know, I had to work harder for everything that I have achieved thus far. And at the end of the day, the hard work surely paid off. So here I am today, and that's what you get when you work hard. Nut City name comes from far back, from since I was approximately 4 years old. I love nuts, peanuts that is. So when they bought peanuts for Christmas, I would eat out all. And when Grace would come looking for the nuts, the empty bottles will be below my bed. So you know what that spelled? That was trouble. I did not grow up with my biological mom, which a lot of persons don't know. They know Miss Grace as my mom, and that's who I consider to be my mom because she raised me from 3 months old. She has 3 wonderful kids, and they have embraced me as their own. And the funny thing is, each and every one of us, we are 5 years apart. So you couldn't tell because growing up with them from small, they say, you know, when you grow up among persons, you all tend to look alike. So you couldn't tell the difference. But my biological parents or the siblings, we are very close as well. You know, we have a close relationship because I'm a loving person, so I embrace each and every one. You know, if it's one thing, she ensures that my shirts are sharply pressed, the pants seam are straight, cut to suit. So, you know, she makes sure that I'm good enough to head out to work. Someone even said to me at the division today, "Not you look so nice, what different about it?" Because they're accustomed to see me in the button-up jersey and the jeans at Wassa. But you know, sometimes in life you have to make a change. When you want to make a difference in society, you have to step outside of the box. You have to think differently, and that's what I decided to do. Now it's different, you know, you have to be an example to others. And I have a son that is coming up and he looks up to me as an example, so I cannot do it alone. We have to do it together. So when you hear about the revamping of the Crown Point area, that spoke to the residents and the business sector within Crown Point. We're going to have some revamping of the pavements. We're going to set up a tourism hub at Cowdong Park, which is the Storby Heritage Park. You know, we're going to enhance the entrance to Pigeon Point. That was Crown Point speaking to you. On the other side, there were persons concerned with the road infrastructure and drainage because, you know, we have a lot of flooding issues. Prior to that beach cleanup, we would have toured Pigeon Point, myself, along with the Secretary for Tourism. And what I saw was disheartening because it's a world-famous beach. And the state that the surroundings was in, it was a bit deplorable. So we decided there and then that we should do a beach cleanup. Because most persons just walk in along the entrance, they see the nice, clean, serene areas. But after you pass Renmar's bar and go around to the back where other activities take place, it was in a mess. I've always been a man on the ground, humble, down to earth, you know, loving, cool, calm, and collective. And that won't change. That can't come out of me. It's embedded in me.
Assembly Legislature wants you to be a part of Tobago's conversation. I'm going to ask you 4 easy questions. If you don't know, we'll learn something today, yeah? Where is the Assembly Legislature located?
Opposite courts, Birmingham Street, Birmingham. Uptown James Park.
In Scarborough, by James Park.
Uptown opposite courts.
I'll take that, but it is located Jerningham Street, Uptown Scarborough, all right? How often are sit-ins held?
Probably once a month.
You want to deliberate a little bit for me?
One day, probably on a Tuesday or something in the month. The last Tuesday in the month. Every other Tuesday in the month.
I do not know.
You want to take a guess for me?
Okay, once a week?
2 or 3 times a year? I don't know. That one hard for me.
That's all right, but let me correct you. It happens the 4th Thursday of every month. Once every month, all right? Who was the first presiding officer?
Mr. Davidson.
No, I don't know what's your first presiding officer.
Be seated. Chief Secretary, you may continue.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Presiding Officer. Madam Presiding Officer, I was at the juncture of reading an interesting telephone WhatsApp conversation between myself and a colleague of the former Deputy Chief Secretary. And in that conversation, Madam Presiding Officer, a screenshot of a conversation she had with one of these 3 contractors was sent to me with the words, "Afternoon, message from," and the name of the contractor listed. That was on the 3rd of August, 2022. And then on the 6th of August, after having not responded, I received another message. "Hi, Farley, have a great weekend there." I said, "Have a good weekend too." And then recognizing for the first time that a message was sent previously, I replied. Actually, this is Farley, the Chief Secretary, talking here. And this is my reply to the request as per the screenshot sent from this female colleague of the former DCS. I said, "Actually, I have discovered significant discrepancies amounting to close to $80 million on this program." At that point, I did not realize that the discrepancies would be closer to $106 million. So I said, "Actually, I have discovered significant discrepancies amounting to close to $80 million on this program that he is a part of that caused the delay." The person said, "Okay, understood." I said, "But even," this is Chief Sec talking here now, I said, "but even them," meaning the company, "will get some payments. We are working feverishly on it." The response, which was a strange one, came. And it says, "Thank God, because he has business set up in my constituency in Trinidad, and he has influence over some community leaders." And it's at that juncture I stopped talking, because now this strange request coming indirectly to pay one of the 3 contractors, Madam Presiding Officer, was coming through somebody who was supposed to be a colleague, but it was coming, Madam Presiding Officer, in hopes that the CHA making all the payments as demanded would assist for some political gain on the ground in Trinidad. Madam Presiding Officer, this Chief Secretary is not part of that. And so, Madam Presiding Officer, when over the last 2 weeks, started seeing some strange public behaviors. And people who I thought were colleagues being antagonistic towards me. I could not understand where that was coming from all of a sudden. I will also report to the House, Madam Presiding Officer, that one individual reported to me, and let me hasten to add that that report came to me a day ago, and I will make the time to make this report to the police. But one individual reported to me that one of the contractors offered him $7 million to use his influence so that he can get paid. It would appear, Madam Presiding Officer, as if with inflation and time, 30 pieces of silver now stands at 7 million TT dollars. And so, beyond an attempt to stop this sitting by way of pre-action protocol letters and threats to go to court, beyond WhatsApp messages seeking to coerce some kind of payments or payments in full to allow for political gain on the ground, and might I add, in a Port of Spain district, despite all the subtle hints of threats, despite, Madam Presiding Officer, all the false accusations labeled against me spitefully in an attempt to sully my name and to destroy the need for this report, Madam Presiding Officer, I am still standing strong. Farley and friends are standing strong. I wish to take this opportunity, Madam Presiding Officer, and I said it at the very start of the presentation, that this presentation is not just for those who committed these deeds in the past, but it is a warning to those who are now in power, who are part of my team. The same fate will meet you should you attempt to do the same things. Because the moral arc of the universe is long, Madam Presiding Officer, but it always bends towards justice. It always bends towards justice. And this is only the beginning of the matter. This is one, Madam Presiding Officer, out of 5 programs that were audited. 1 out of 5 programs audited, Madam Presiding Officer. There are 4 other audit reports to come. And from all indications thus far, the pattern seems to be the same or worse. And so, Madam Presiding Officer, what this audit report shows us is that when there is a claim for $206 million for road resurfacing program, in reality, the THA should only be paying $100 million of those claims. It also shows that the THA have already paid some monies that it should not have paid. I have present in the presentation and omitted to state it. The ledger with the 11 roads, the ledger with the 21 roads, and when all members receive their copies, they will be able to see name of companies, name of roadways, cost of roadways, and the projects for which they receive payments for that were not completed, Madam Presiding Officer. Even as I stand here today, I am painfully aware, just looking at the opportunity cost of this matter, looking at what we could have gotten for the amount of monies spent, judging from the fact, Madam Presiding Officer, that if we paid for Bel Air Charlottesville Road, that I know all too well, because that's the road up until December 12 I used to take to go and find wife that I now have. But had they really done the work for the monies they received, Madam Presiding Officer, they would be relieved to scores, to hundreds of villagers. That must mean something in this house. But finally, Madam Presiding Officer, I wish to end on a perhaps emotional note. The suit I decided to wear today, Madam Presiding Officer, is quite purposeful. I received the suit in 2017 when my closet was still empty. And this suit was brought back from London by the then minority leader, Watson Solomon Duke, as a gift, because he knew his brother ain't get no clothes. I didn't get all the cut-out clothes I have now. And it pains me, Madam Presiding Officer, to see that at this juncture, when we are ready to get rolling, ready to clean up this mess, he is not here, and that he has chosen Port of Spain over Roxborough, Port of Spain over Tobago. And I will not end this presentation without saying, Brother Duke, I know there will come a day when I will have to rescue you, because Port of Spain does not love you as much as Tobago loves you. And so, Madam Presiding Officer, I open myself to any questions at this point.
We agreed to have 5 questions from the minority bench. Minority Leader, you may proceed.
First question to the Chief Secretary is just for us to get a clear understanding as to, so this is the preliminary report. So when would we get the final report, and what was the need to rush this report if it's not the final report? Why not wait for the final report?
This is only called a preliminary report because there are 3 steps left to be taken. However, the findings here are facts and will not change. The details of the report will not change. The 3 steps that are required are administrative steps to ensure that all the legal issues, requirements are met. But the need to bring this report to this House is because we had several delays in getting the report in the first place. And I promised sometime in August that I will, before August, about July, that I will bring the report to the House in September. And true to form, I have brought the report to the House and to the people of Tobago, but I wish to reiterate, this is 1 out of 5. The other 4 will come.
Minority Leader.
Can the Honorable Chief Secretary just give us a timeline as to when these other 4 reports would be ready? And would we have to go through this process every time you receive a report, or would we have a comprehensive sort of statement going forward?
That's 2 questions or 1 minority?
I won't use the 5.
That's fine. Even if it goes beyond the 5, that's fine. The report, I'm advised that the remaining 4 reports should all be completed in time for the end of this calendar year, so in time for the end of December. So I would like to give myself January month to present the remaining reports. I am hopeful that for the remaining reports, I won't have to single them out, but I can do it as one group presentation of all to Tobago.
Minority Leader.
Based on the findings, there seem to be some insinuation that there are some procedural administrative steps, lapses. What is this current administration going to do to ensure that going forward we are in a position to not be in this place where there are reasons to question the process?
Thank you, and I'm happy for that question. I understand why I asked you to join me in building out of this whistleblower regime that we had to set up, because that's the thought pattern. How do we prevent this from happening again? It's not just administrative, but the report strongly suggests that there were coercion and collusion between people that we pay in the THA to protect our business and the private enterprises that we do business with. And we have to, one, have a zero tolerance on that and make examples of those so culpable. Number two, we have to put systems in place such as the whistleblower legislation to allow for early detection of this kind of behavior. And number three, I already asked the chief administrator to find some time and some space to have all of our accounting staff, our AU1s, AU2s, our administrators, retrained in terms of the expectations of the Audit and Exchequer Act, to be trained in terms of the public service accounting principles and the regulations that guide the country, and that too should help in us stemming this flow. But I'm hopeful, with your help, Minority Leader, that we can in fact find a way to stem this tide and to create a cleaner way of doing business.
Minority Leader.
Well, I wish to let the Chief Secretary know that we on this side, we always call right, right, and wrong, wrong, so we stand in the line of right all the time. And given that you would have made a commitment, the minority raised an issue with respect to some concerns with the school repairs program, and you publicly indicated no challenge in having an audit done. Would the school repair program be added to the list of audit now that we have an auditor on board?
Oh yes, certainly, not a problem at all. Because I am the chief secretary, and while I might be the chief of all secretaries, I do not run all divisions. And so if you believe something untoward happened, I will certainly like to know and operate from a place of knowledge as opposed to a place of ignorance. So not an issue at all. I will give a commitment to adding that program to the list of programs to be audited.
I'll allow for one more question if you have any. Minority Leader?
I have no further question. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Minority Leader. Clerk?
Yes, Presiding Officer, I just wish to thank you and thank this House and thank Tobago for listening. Thank Tobago for getting a clearer picture. Not just, what happened over the last 2 weeks is now water under the bridge, but to understand why so much went into avoiding the truths being told today. It's critically important, Madam Presiding Officer. And I pray God that as we do the rest of audits, that no other member of the team that I guess is now being called Farley and Friends will be led astray or coerced away in favor of trying to ensure that what must be presented to the people is presented in due course, and that we take the necessary corrective actions. Thank you very much. God bless you all.
Clerk?
Motion for adjournment.
Leader of Assembly Business.
Madam Presiding Officer, I rise to move that this House now stands adjourned for a date to be fixed.
Members, the question put is that this House stands adjourned for a date to be fixed. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any against? The ayes have it. This House now stands adjourned for a date to be fixed. Pleasant afternoon.